Okay, welcome to another edition of the Edlow podcast. I want to thank everyone who subscribes and everyone who follows. We've seen quite an increase recently in followers and an uptick in downloads. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. We're coming up on 50 episodes, and it's been a privilege. And this is a privilege as well. I am here with Ethan A. Poetic. Ethan, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. This is a kind of a new one for me. This is one where you actually reached out to me and told me that you feel that you have a great story to share, and I looked at your website and it seems to be true. I mean, you grew up. Where did you grow up?
I'm originally from Coatesville, home with the Coatesville Red Raiders, Rick Hamilton, and many
Nice.
other great student athletes. Um, the big change that happened was when I was born. I ended up my dad ended up denying me that I was his, but he didn't know that my mom was pregnant. Supposedly, it wasn't
Hmm.
until my aunt found out for herself. She checked out my behind my ears, my feet, my hands, my eyes, and she said, "Oh, this is my brother's child."
Hmm.
And once my dad finally saw me, there goes the doubts. The guy I'm named after, he actually has a twin named Eric, and
Hmm.
him and my mom's family grew up in the same neighborhood. And eventually, my mom decided to name me after Ethan
Hmm.
because my dad didn't know I was born, or supposedly, and he wasn't there at the birth, and my parents were never like together.
Hmm.
So one day after I was born, my mom called Ethan over and said, "This is my child." He saw me in the bassinet, and then she told him, "I named my son after you." And he was just very like surprised and felt welcomed. It wasn't until like 2016 when I finally got to meet him, Ethan. He was just as curious about me as I was curious about him. And we were eating at Chili's. We had good lunch, and we just had a natural connection. Then called his mom and asked her, "Where'd you get the name Ethan from?" And she said, "Out the Bible." So I guess my name's a prophecy.
Nice, nice. So now where did you grow up? What city and state?
I'm originally from Coatesville. What ended up happening was halfway or three-quarters of the way into my eighth grade year, after I finished my wrestling season at Gordon Middle School, I get told we're moving to Lancaster, and that kind of like made things hit the reset button for me because I ended up moving to Lancaster, and I for the first 21 days of living in Lancaster, I didn't go to school. It wasn't
Hmm.
until early April of 2001 where I finally was able to go to Wheatland Middle School, and that was less than third. That was less than 60 school days. So I had my eighth grade promotion. Two weeks later, I'm signed up for football, and it's time to do the summer workouts with many great student athletes like Perry Patterson, Danny Melendez, Joe Holler, Naquan Lee, and many others. The big reason why it helped was I was still feeling homesick with not living in Coastal,
Hmm.
leaving everything I already had, and I was already projected to start varsity along with many others by our 10th grade year.
Hmm. So let me
So
ask you real quick. When you said you moved to Lancaster, your whole family, or did you just you?
it was just me and my siblings. My older sibling was already an adult,
Hmm.
so he technically, prior to us moving to another different place, until my mom made that announcement, he wasn't living with us anymore. He was living more independently.
Hmm.
It's just a situation of being in transition where I'm used to seeing him in a room next to me, and then we moved to this other place in Lancaster, Coatesville, and just didn't feel the same. But I still saw him at certain family gatherings. Then when we moved to Lancaster, I didn't see him as much,
Hmm. Okay.
and that,
So
that was a big transition.
so when you say um, you moved with your siblings, did your mother not move with you? Did you move in with someone else?
Now we all us the other siblings, let's see, two brothers and a baby sister. We all moved to Lancaster. The guy she was with was considered my stepdad, and they were married for a brief time period, but the relationship was just more chaotic.
Hmm. Mm,
He still lives in Lancaster, but it's just a situation where involved him being involved with the drugs, the alcoholism, and losing a job here. And eventually, you start burning bridges with jobs that are close
mm,
by. You got to drive farther and farther away.
mm.
And eventually, a divorce did happen, but by then the damage was already done.
Yeah. When did that happen? How old were
I
you?
had,
How old were you
I
when
was
that
in my,
happened?
I had to be in my teenage years, either 12th or 11th grade year
Oh,
in
wow.
high
Okay.
school.
So at that point, it had been a few years. You're in Lancaster. Divorce happens with. Is this like the kind of the only father figure you had at this point?
Yeah, that's the guy I saw the most. Saw him more time than my dad. 'Cause my dad, me and him were already not seeing each other as much in Coatesville.
Mm,
Prior to the guy my mom got married to, there was another father figure who was more like a stepdad to me because my mom ended up having two kids with him.
mm,
And then they dated for like 8 years, cohabitated for several years, but never got married. I did have
mm.
a talk with him, like maybe last year around this time. He explained to me, some things didn't work out, along with some other things that were kind of like some bridges that didn't get mended.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah,
So let me ask you on that. It sounds like for you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like for you, teenage years from middle school through high school were rather chaotic years. Is that fair?
yeah, it was like an up and down situation where I already don't have a healthy relationship with my biological father. The stepfather I did have, he's gone. Then you
Mm,
bring in another man who's not making healthy decisions. That's not helping. What did help me was sports,
mm,
having that relationship with the coaches. And then when I moved to Lancaster, there was this guy who was living next to us. We always played the sporting games together, video games, have our conversations. I will cook food for him sometimes when he gets home from work. And then one day he said something that really changed my life. He said he sees me as his other son.
oh,
So
nice.
we end up evolving more like a father son relationship. And it just became that bond. I was like the son he never had. Now he was the father I never had. He
What
was
was it?
already
What was his name?
Anhajuwa.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's originally from New York. Wasn't until he became an adult where he ended up moving to Lancaster, and he ended up getting married to a woman who already had kids, but he already had kids from a previous marriage as well. And once their divorces got finalized, sometime later, prior to me moving to Lancaster, that's when they ended up getting married. And he explained to his wife, "Hey, this guy is a cool kid. He wants to be productive. It's just a situation where he's got hurdles to overcome."
Yeah. Now your siblings also. It sounds to me that there was something about you that made you want to be productive even in a chaotic situation. Did you see that same will, I guess, in your siblings, or is that just specific to you?
It was just me. My siblings were much younger when all that stuff was going on,
Mm,
and it's just a situation where I seen on this show called A&E, where not every sibling's willing to go against the grain for a better future,
sure, sure.
and it just became a situation where when it came to my dad and my mom, they were never together. But when it comes to their dad and our mom, they were together. And then for children to see their parents break up and people go their separate ways as they move into different households, it's not the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something much different they have to go through compared to me, where I was already accepting that my parents were never together. He was already with somebody else.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up. So you bring up the fact that your siblings were younger. I have three siblings. We're all spaced out. My brother, next oldest in line. I'm the oldest. Next oldest in line is 5 years younger than me. My sister's 10 years younger than me, and then my other sister's 21 years younger than me. All with the same parents. My parents are still together. My dad, I've been very open about the fact that my dad struggled with drugs basically throughout my childhood up until my teenage years, and he's been over 25 years clean and sober now, and I'm really proud of him for that. But it's a different experience when you're a teenager versus a young kid. And so my experience and my recall of that situation is much different than my brother, who was 5 years younger than me, and then my sister, who was 10 years younger than me. They just have completely different, it's almost like they have completely different childhoods because they're so much younger. Sounds like something similar happened with you, where you had younger siblings, and so your experience in going through that is much different than theirs. And for some reason, it struck in you a chord, a will to kind of rise above it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I do. Like, I give like a joke situation, but also a serious situation. Like, I was a bad guy before. Like, I did go to jail twice.
Oh, seriously? Okay, so let's let's
Yeah.
talk about that. How old were you when you went to jail?
I was a kid,
Okay, how old?
7 or 8.
Oh,
I remember like it was yesterday. Take pictures of people. They got the handcuffs. Me and my friends were rolling dice. And to say jokingly, when I went to jail, I landed in jail playing Monopoly.
play Monopoly?
Yeah,
Play, explain.
that's how I first landed in jail.
Well,
I
tell me
was
the story. Tell me how that happened.
basically on the road. I was trying to get around the corner, but I hit two snake eyes, which is like ones on the die, and I landed in jail. Luckily, I had a get out of jail free card. Yeah.
Okay, so
Not a
so when you say you were in jail, you were in Monopoly jail. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now the
okay.
serious jail part wasn't my fault. It's more I would just say the combination was certain family members' decisions and my mom boyfriend. They were actually locked up in the county prison, and I remember like it was yesterday. My mom said we're leaving. I know where we're going, so we go to the count. I think it was Chester County Prison. It's in Westchester School District. And I remember like it was yesterday. We see this rural areas, farm, cows, bales of hay, and we go into the parking lot. When you go in, they took our pictures. And it's not like like a cell phone thing. It's more like the camera pictures. We got take this thing out and then fan it out so it can
Yeah, Polaroids. Yeah.
get that. Then your name gets put on a file. When you fill out some paperwork, then you go through a metal detector. Something beeps
Mhm.
off. You got empty your pockets. Then maybe a pat down search if it's necessary. And then when it's time to visit the person you have a limited amount of time. And there's like a divider right here, and your hands cannot cross that divider. And yeah, I saw certain family members and my mom's boyfriend over there, and those guys were spent a lot of time lifting the weights, but it was basically the choices they made that got them in there.
And what was it, if you recall? What was it? The circumstances for them going there? Was it drugs or something different?
One person, possession of drugs. Another person, I don't know the whole story. I just know that when you get arrested, you go before a judge. If a judge, considers, hey, I'm tired of seeing you in my courtroom. It's time to make an example out of you. Let's go by with the law. All right, I'll send you to a certain amount of time in the county prison. Any time that goes from 3 months to 2 years or a year and a half, you get to go to county. Anything over two years, you're going upstate. That could be
Yeah.
Camp Hill, that could be Huntington prison, or I can go way out west to Pittsburgh area prisons. And once you're in there, you really get to find out who really wants to be there for you, as far as who want to put money on your commissary, who want to take out a whole day to visit you on a Saturday or a Sunday. And you got to be on your best behavior while you're in the facility, or you lose that privilege of phone
Mm,
calls, visitors. Or if you really want to be bad, all right, we'll put you in a hole for a month, 2, 3. Hey, your choice, your consequence. And
yeah.
also, they humiliate you in jail. Instead of calling you by name, you got to tell the person in the morning or for roll call your number.
Mm.
And when you say it so many times, it gets ingrained in you. For some people, they realize, I don't want to come back here ever again.
Mm.
For some people, they get institutionalized to the point where if they don't know their purpose or want to overcome their own underlying pain, wounds, and scars, they make the rich richer for the judges, the parole officers, the correctional officers, because prison and correctional facilities is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, some people don't want to learn. But there's also some situations where some people were wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted, because evidence withheld, the DNA wasn't a match, and the prosecutors knew it. And also some situations where if you don't got a good lawyer fighting and going to bat for you, you might be forced to take a plea deal because you might not want to take a chance with a judge or a jury trial.
Yeah, I think most people don't understand how, I wouldn't say rigged, but how stacked the cards are against you when you are a poor person in the legal system. And it's not by any one person's fault necessarily as it is the system. If you look at the systems, the state has to fund both the prosecutor's office and the defense bar for public defenders. And so they take the money and they put it there, but politically, everybody wants the prosecutor's office to be really well funded, but they don't necessarily care if the public defenders are well funded. So most public defenders that I know are very, very much underpaid, very much overworked. So it's really hard for them to pay attention to their clients. And unfortunately, if you don't have the money for a private attorney, you end up with a public defender who, not that they don't care or they don't want to be want to help, but they are so overworked, it's nearly impossible for them to put on the best defense. And so it results in a lot of poor people, unfortunately, being disproportionately placed in jail for crimes that people who are well off and can afford an attorney wouldn't spend as much time or any time for. And it sounds like that was the situation here. Ethan, did you serve some time in prison then, or in
No,
jail?
I've never been arrested.
No, you never did. Okay, so family members did, and so when your family members are in jail, I mean, who is it that you are looking to for support? Is it your coaches? Is it your teachers? Who's stepping up for you?
It's a combination of a lot of things. When I was in Coastal, it was like living in the neighborhood I was living in. There was some of the neighbors who had wonderful relationships with their kids, but married with their the moms, who were their wives.
Mm-hmm.
There was times they let me come over, play the video games, play on the streets with certain activities, and then I remember just the cookouts. I just felt more welcome in that open space, and then I also remember going to the Crans camp. I forgot, it was Josh Cranch's father and mom opened it up because they felt like it was a calling to come to Coastville to do some evangelizing and missionary work. And then when I moved to Lancaster, everything changed in the sense of I had the father figure who lived next door, and there's certain neighbors in the area where I lived in allowed me to come over to their house. Then also in 2002, and again introduced to Tuesday Church from these Mennonite people. And learn more about God on an individual level without the choir, the preacher. It's more about allowing a person to ask questions, a person to just be free. Because in church setting, it's more like you got to wear a certain outfit, act a certain way. But in Tuesday Church, you get to be more yourself without all these barriers. And that's when a teenager gets to be fully who they want to be, not who a parent wants them to be.
Yeah. So tell me then, tell me the role of faith in church. Tell me what role that played in kind of keeping you on a straight and narrow path.
There's a lot of things. Like, for example, remembering like certain scriptures. Like, for example, I have a wristband that talks about the serenity prayer, where God granted me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually a great quote that is often used in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous for recovering addicts. And that's so true. We have this thought in life that somehow we're in control of everything. And unfortunately, that's not true. I thought, coming out of high school, I started training at a pro wrestling school, thought I was going to go and tour the world as a pro wrestler. 2 months later, the place shuts down. And then I end up serving a mission. I come back, I think that I'm going to buy a house, and I'm going to end up selling the house and using it to go to law school, and then the market crashes and I have to sell the house at a loss. You just, you don't, things are always going to change and you have to deal with it. But if you keep moving forward and you keep a goal in mind and you keep moving forward no matter what, 5-10 years from now, when you have that degree, or when you're playing with your kid, or when you're playing with your grandkid, or when you have that new marriage, or you have that new loved one in your life, you're not even going to remember how you feel in those moments. And so tell me, what, your situation, hearing what I've heard so far. You have what is the classic situation of statistics. And what I mean by that is broken home, people going to jail, right? You have multiple siblings from multiple different men. All of these things that we hear as the statistics for people who end up on the streets, or end up in the prison system, or end up in the foster care system, the statistics of people who don't succeed. What is different about Ethan Poetic that allowed you to rise above, and succeed?
Well, first you got one better. Because I remember being in farmlands with the Amish and the Mennonite people, I realized it was more to life than what I was living, because I look at their situation where once they get done 8th grade, they can work a job making $20+ an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a situation where their father could have 10 kids with one woman and don't depend on the government for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to the network they're in, generation after generation after generation. Therefore, nobody lives in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody shall go with less than. When I'm looking at my situation and some other people's situation, I'm like, why should we wait till we're 18 to start making some serious money when I'm seeing the Mennonites making a lot of money for their kids and looking out for their best interest? And then they're also looking out for their cousin's best interest. And then I also look at my situation like, how is it that my family has to depend on the welfare, food stamps, child support, and barely get by? But then I learned in life that some of the things we depend on for the government is not going to make us rich. The government never intends for those programs to make us rich. They're intended to employ people in the government to allow people to still maintain certain stability of not going homeless, not going without food. But what has happened over the years was people start taking advantage of the system, thinking they're getting over on the system. But the reality is that when you depend on the government, when you depend on welfare and food stamps and all this other stuff, you're not leaving a great legacy behind. You're leaving more of a poverty mindset, language, and lifestyle. Because most homeowners are not depending on the government. They're getting tax breaks from the government. They're also having home-based businesses where they can write that off. They're also writing off the mileages for their cars, airplane rides, or any type of traveling arrangements. Ultimately, for me, I wanted more. I wanted better, and that's something I always wanted, because I saw my grandma's legacy. 2 different grandmas. I saw one person who was a single parent household where she had 4 kids by 4 different men. She still made the newspaper for her potato salad, which was famous. And the thing that she still has left behind to this day is her house where she was a homeowner. And she did it without government funding. Now, when it came to my other grandma, she had 11 kids with one man, and they were homeowners. And I just saw like different blueprints of my grandparents' legacy of facing things that are much different now that compared back then, and still willing to break the barriers. Then I also remember the power of prayer. I also remember, you're going to grow apart from certain people. Some of my friends that I grew up in Coatesville, some of them are, did go to jail, while some of them did go to college and graduate. Some became entrepreneurs, some served in the military. And then here in Lancaster, with some of my teammates on certain sports teams, I'm one of the few that actually graduated from college not once but twice. And that really empowers my coaches to see that it's not about the X's and O's for football, how I'm taking down somebody on the mat or running for track. It's more about I want you to turn this boy or teenager into a man who has a college degree. And that's what it's really about, because most coaches who are teaching in middle school, high school, a diocese school, or private schools already have college degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. So in talking with you, again, I want to ask, who do you think were the biggest, who would you say is the single biggest influence in getting Ethan Poetic off the streets and through high school and through college?
It wasn't one person. It was just several people in different seasons and different time periods. It helped to have a father figure next door.
Mm-hmm.
It helped to be welcome in other people's neighbors' households. It also helps to be with the Amish and Mennonite culture, get away from my own home where I felt more peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
It also helped to just see a vision that was bigger than my circumstances. One of the circumstances was, 2010. Unfortunately, my older brother did pass away due to gun violence, and justice was served. And that hurt a lot of people to the core, especially when I became an older brother overnight due to those unfortunate circumstances. And once the funeral, the Passover, and the burial went away, I ran into a guy named Jordan Steffi, who I always saw on television, newspapers, because he was a 3-sport star at Conestoga Valley School District, where he played football, basketball, and track, and he ended up going to the University of Maryland. And he had his nonprofit called, at the time, Children Deserve a Chance Foundation, now rebranded to Edlow. What inspired him to do it was one of his classmates or students at his high school needed money for brain surgery. And once Jordan scored his 1,000 points, he encouraged the crowd to donate $1 for every point he scored, and used that funding to give to the guy for his hospital bill to get his brain surgery. And then sometime later, the guy who had the brain surgery came back and thanked him very much. And that's where he found his passion of giving back for those in need. Eventually, his nonprofit evolved to helping students get into college, where they could be the first gen to graduate, or be an entrepreneur, learn coding, or go to the military or law school, or learn a trade.
Is that where did you kind of hook up with him and use his foundation to kind of help you get through some of these things?
Well, yeah, I was an adult at the time, and when we first met, it was at a church on a Saturday night service. When he sat next to me, I couldn't believe it. The light was shining on him. He had the nicest outfits. His sneakers were very clean, and the shoelaces were still intact. I said, "Are you Jordan Stuff?" He said, "Yeah." We shook hands. We talked after the service, and we kept running to each other in the city by coincidence. And one day had an event for Michael Vick, with his dog situation. After he paid his debt to society, got signed by the Philadelphia Eagles. They decided to have an event for him. And before Michael Vick spoke, that's where I got announced as the guy for the poetry and welcome into the foundation.
Okay. So you write poetry?
Yeah, I do. Poetry, special speeches, and other stuff. And it's just a situation where I was writing a poem about Michael Vick's situation, and he's having an event about Michael Vick. And, the two things just merged together.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was a year later, after that Michael Vick event, we ended up having a fundraiser event. And after everything was good, was selling the Dewsbury watches. I leave with my uncle, my aunt, and 2 cousins as we're getting ready to go to Philly. And then next thing you know, I'm involved in a near-fatal car accident where I had a 99% chance of death versus 1% chance of life in the middle of Paradise, Pennsylvania.
Holy cow. Okay, so you've thrown like a bunch of stuff at me. I want to go through some of these things. So let's talk about that first. So you're in a car accident. When did that happen?
March 19th, 2011, on a
Wow.
Saturday afternoon.
Wow. And tell me just briefly what happened?
It's a situation where I tell people all the time where I got involved in the car accident, but I don't remember the car accident.
Okay. So were you knocked unconscious?
Yeah, it's like I had to like look at the car from the pictures or the newspapers, to look at the articles from online. Then I got to look at the television reportings, and I got to listen to people's description, and then actually I got to use my imagination and tell people, the driver ran into an 18-wheeler,
Oh wow.
and
So
that's what caused the accident.
so were you in the car? Or were you a
Yes.
pedestrian? Okay. Were
Yeah, I
you a
was behind the
passenger?
driver. Yeah, I was behind the driver.
Oh wow. Okay. So he ran into an 18-wheeler and somehow your car got involved as well.
Yeah, I was inside the car with him.
Oh, you were inside the car of the guy who hit the 18-wheeler.
Yeah, it was me,
Okay.
my aunt, and my uncle, and two cousins.
Oh wow. So you all were pretty banged up, I would imagine.
Yes.
So in that situation, uh, tell me what injuries you suffered.
Let's see, a concussion, a fractured collarbone, an injury to my wrist,
Hmm.
lost a lot of blood, and the
Yeah.
biggest one was my aorta had torn. I should have died within 3 to 5 minutes, but it just didn't happen that way.
Wow. Wow. So how long was your recovery?
At least a year is a combination of being in the hospital for a month, being in rehab for at least a month, and then being on a feeding tube for several months where I couldn't eat or drink anything in my mouth. The consequences are going to be pneumonia.
Wow. So now at this point in 2011, like we should say to the listeners, so you graduated high school, you worked, odd jobs, you met Mr. Steffi, and you pursued higher education through community college and ultimately received at Millersville University a bachelor's degree. Did that happen before or after your car accident?
That happened. The car accident happened before I went to college.
Wow. So that's really interesting to me because, especially, how are you? Well, first of all, let me ask you, as far as the concussion goes and all your injuries, how are you doing now? Are you physically feeling good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's 12 years ago. I know I'm an attorney by trade. I do personal injury law, so I know a few things about car accidents, and I know one of the things about concussions. I've suffered a concussion in a car accident, and that's no joke. It's a struggle, and so the fact that even after all of that, you were able to pursue higher education and get a bachelor's degree really is remarkable. Um, so, so you get the car accident in 2011, and then you also mentioned your brother uh, was died due to gun violence.
Yeah,
When
it was
was
the year.
that?
That was the year before.
Wow. So in 2010.
Yes.
And so your brother, now before that, I know you said earlier your brother was a little bit older. Did
Yes.
you have a good relationship with him prior to that? Did you keep in
I
contact with him?
did. I did. It's just we have a big age gap between 9 to 10 years.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
by the time I'm in elementary, he's already in high school, getting ready to graduate.
Right, right. And the circumstances, did he fall into a bad crowd or was he just kind of a bystander in a situation or what?
Some guy gunned him down randomly.
Just random, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
the guy tried to say my brother broke into his house, but the thing is, if someone breaks into your house, you would normally call the cops to make a police report. When the cops
Right.
went to that guy's house, they didn't see no damage done with the doors, windows. So the cops already knew something was fishy. And based what the police found and what I ended up finding out on my own was that this guy was driving around for my brother or somebody else, and luckily the cameras caught the situation on camera because what a shooting happened was in an alleyway, but it just so happens where that alleyway is, there's a post office that has cameras throughout the property, and it had cameras facing in the alleyway.
Hmm.
They
So they
already got
caught
a picture.
everything.
They caught the footage of everything, plus they had the license plates, the year, make, and model.
Hmm.
And then once you put that to the Pennsylvania database and break down the coastal area, Well, that's when they put that thing in the newspaper, and the driver who was involved, well, his wife encouraged him to come forward. And once his wife, found out what happened, you know, I'm not sure if the cops gave him any consequences, even though they needed him as a witness. What ended up happening in his situation, as far as the driver goes, is once his wife found out everything, and then, once the conviction happened for the guy who was involved, that's when his wife left him and took the kids. Because she wanted no part in supporting someone who took place in a murder, a homicide. And then to hide it and use the vehicle and not say anything. No woman wants their kids part of that.
Yeah. Did he is he still serving? Do you know if he's still in prison?
Well, the guy who did the shooting, he's got life in prison. The guy who's involved, I don't know what type of deal he made with the DA. I just know they needed him as the eyewitness since he was the person there. It's one thing to have a camera, but you gotta have an eyewitness along with the evidence of the cell phones. Because when you make a cell phone call, it bounces off the GPS.
Yeah.
It's gonna locate where you are.
So the guy you're referring to then is
the driver and the eyewitness.
Okay, and so he struck a deal and he's not serving time at this point, but his wife ended up leaving him.
Yep, took the kids and everything.
Wow. So that's a rough couple of years. So tell me then, and then also another thing you mentioned was you put some emphasis on the Mennonite Amish community, and you referenced church. Do you go to church in a Mennonite Amish place, or is that just kind of somewhere where you learned?
A combination of both. They do things much differently, but I also see like certain principles. Like, for example, they emphasize, forgiving people, and they also emphasize the women not to be sexually active until they're married. And most of the people who are in the Amish and Mennonite learn certain dating practices because they have a man in the house who's staying with their mother and father who are having those conversations with them. Yeah. But then then I also realized in my different culture where I live, dating's more, hey, I like somebody in this neighborhood, she looks pretty or this and that. But most of the times in those situations, there's more breakups than having good relationships, because some people get into relationships with access baggage. We're not taking the time to heal themselves first.
That's a great point.
I also realized, in the Amish and Mennonite, you have a lesser dating pool with choosing people in your own community compared to, my situation where you can choose different people, but then the question becomes, which one do you want to be with? Because you can't be in the talking phase forever.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So you kind of learned, it sounds like some of the lessons you learned from the Mennonite community had to do with relationships, hard work, working at a younger age, right? Rather than just wait until you're 18. And how have those lessons shaped who Ethan Poetic is now?
It goes back to a quote I learned where it takes a village to raise a child. And in that village, there's some good people, there's some bad people. It's a matter of who do you want in your life and which crowd do you want to be with. And, sometimes people think in my community, the way out is work doing sports, being a rapper, selling drugs, or doing something else. But when I look at other cultures that still does have diversity in it, they're thinking about becoming lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, serving in the military, you name it. And it goes back to exposure. What are you exposing yourself to the most? Positivity or negativity? And then you also have to look at, who's really helping you out, who's really supporting you wholeheartedly without any hidden agendas or strings attached.
How did you, let me ask it a different way. It sounds like what you're saying is that you had, as you were growing up, a lot of positive influences on your life within your community from various different sources that helped you stay in a positive mindset and goal-oriented, even in times of difficulties. But I got to imagine in your circumstance, there were also a lot of negative influences as well. How was it that you were able to focus on those positive influences and kind of peel away from the negative ones?
Um, I'll mention a story real quick where there's certain people who like kind of ask, "Have you had a talk with my dad? Have you had a talk with your dad?" And I said, "No." I said, "When was the last time you seen him?" Several months. And it's a situation where they tell me, it's not my fault. It's up to him to be a man and step up to the plate. I remember one time as a man, somebody encouraged me to talk to the pastor where my dad was where he was a trustee with the money, and asked the pastor to mediate for us. And I wasn't sure about that, but the guy kept encouraging me to do it. So I did it, asked the pastor on the phone, "Hey, could you mediate for us?" And the pastor said, "Sure, I'll be welcome to do it." And then eventually the pastor came back. He talked to my dad twice, and my dad said no both times. And what ended up happening later down the road during my recovery was his wife had called me on the phone and asked me to hang out with her for lunch. And we met at a nursing home. She picked me up there with my younger brother. That's her son with my dad. And we ended up going to Perkins for lunch. In the middle of eating, she drops the bomb on me where she said my dad's not going to help me get my life back together. And that's when I lost my appetite. I looked at her differently, like, you want to meet me here just to tell me that? You want to do my dad's dirty work while being his wife, while being submissive? And, after that, I was ready to go. So she dropped me off at Manhattan Township High School at a basketball game. And I ended up catching up with some people there, had a good time. And then eventually, I turned that discouragement into encouragement by getting my driver's license. It took me 3 times with 3 different cars, but I still passed and got it. Posted it on social media. I had over 200 likes on those pictures on Facebook. And then eventually, I got one of the first cars I got on my own was a 95 Ford Taurus. I was able to pay it forward to certain people to help them get their driver's license. And once that car started showing some wear and tear, I knew it was time to get a brand new one. Then a woman who I'd known, she was willing to take me up to Jones Apple Honda of York for a car. And when I got there, she asked me what type of car I'm going to get. I said, "I'm getting a brand new one." They said, "You sure?" I said, "Yes." So I go for this test drive, and the car was a red Honda Civic 2016, right out the showroom. And I liked it. I said, "I want this one." And that's when the guy went to the paperwork. And then the woman asked me, "What type of car you got?" I said, "I'm getting that one." "You said, you sure?" "Yeah, I'm getting that one out the showroom." Her jaw dropped, eyes of excitement and everything else. And then while I'm in the car, she pulls out her cell phone and becomes the paparazzi and TMZ, starts taking pictures of me. And then she starts sending it to all her friends. I'm like, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm taking pictures of you. This is a proud moment." And she got in the passenger car, and she was very proud and everything. And eventually I told other people. And one day when I go back to Coatesville, some people told me, drive up to my dad's house and show him what he missed out on. I told him I'm not going to do that. He's going to find out through word of mouth. So one day I'm at the light. I parked my car, had my picture taken next to the sign said, "Welcome to Coatesville." As I'm going back to my car, my dad's at the red light. He sees me with the brand new car. And there wasn't much he could say. Yeah. He missed out. And hey, I did it without him. And I didn't allow, his words of discouragement to his wife to hold me back. And I explained that to tell other people, you cannot allow someone's discouragement from stopping you from living your life and your purpose.
There's something I like about what you said there, and that is that there are 2 types of people in a situation like that, where you are looking. This is not a story, just so you know, the story that you shared, I appreciate you sharing it. It's not something that hasn't happened before. A lot of people have those moments. I know someone very close to me who had that moment with a father that they'd never met. And before, and that father said that they couldn't be a part of their lives, and it really, really rocked them to the core. And we're all going to have those moments like that that rock us to the core. But what I love about what you did was you had two choices in that moment. You could shrink and say, well, no one's going to help me, so I can't do it. Or you can rise above and say, I'm going to do it anyway. And you made the choice to say, hey, you know what? He's not going to help me. Fine, I'm going to do it anyway. And the thing that's interesting about that is, and the thing I would share, nobody, neither one of my parents finished college. Neither one of them have college degrees. They're great people. They work very hard, but that just wasn't something that they did. And, I had a rough and tumble life a little bit. And so when I was going to go to law school, my best friend actually told me that he didn't think I would make it. And, nobody believes in you until the success is made. Then everybody wants to say that they were a part of the journey. But the thing is that the journey to success is often very, very, very lonely. And there's going to be a lot of nights where you're going to have a lot of self-doubt. There's going to be a lot of people who tell you can't do it. There's going to be people who come in and out of your life. There's going to be people who actively try to stop you. But if you have a goal and you believe in yourself, you can make it. And you, Ethan Poetic, is an example of that. So now, Ethan, you've written a book, right?
Yes.
Tell us about your book and what is it about?
This is a soft cover. My book title is called The Inspirational Story of Ethan A. Poetic Chronicles of Adversities, Education, Sports, Resiliency. And
Nice.
This is the hardcover with a laminated case.
Nice. It looks good. Not bad. Not bad.
I got 2 back cover reviews from Dave Berman and Dante McLeod or Claude, whatever. Yeah, him. I'm self-published because some publishers just weren't offering good deals for my story. And one of the situations happened where one of the publishers said, if I sign with them, they said, if they choose my story for a movie and a soundtrack, they'll own the lion's share's rights of it. So they were already thinking about a multi-million-dollar idea about my situation. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can't sign with them. And I realized I could probably do what Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent, and Tyler Perry did, which is write my own script, create my own movie, and soundtrack myself independently and look for a distribution deal in my favor. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the story of Master P, where he was sitting across the desk with Jimmy Iovine, where he offered him $1 million advance, which is another word for a loan. Him and his brother said, if this guy's offering us $1 million, we're probably worth more than that. So they told Jimmy Iovine, we're going out for lunch. And Jimmy Iovine told him, you don't come back, you're not going to have a record deal because I know everybody in town. And they never went back, so they went back to the Calio projects in New Orleans, and he ended up starting his own label, No Limit Records, and he ended up getting a distribution deal where most of his costs was through the marketing and promoting. It was like an 80-20 or 85-15 deal where he owned the masters, the syncing, and all the other stuff. And he ended up selling millions of dollars, and he became one of the blueprints of showing people that you can do this independently without depending on the record label. You can use this system more for distribution and marketing and promoting and have more of a collaboration deal. It's a matter of just betting on yourself and believing in yourself and having the right people on your team to finish.
I'm very impressed with that because let me tell you, there's a lot of people out there who, if they had a publisher even say, hey, we'll take your book, they would take any deal as long as they got their book published. But it's very impressive that you say, no, I'm going to, I look at these other people who have been wildly successful doing it on their own. Why can't I? And that's another thing that I think is so interesting is that, again, I can only speak to my own experience, but when people ask me about this stuff, I always tell them, I go, I just never doubted that I could do anything. Whenever I said, hey, I want to be a wrestler, I did it. And if people said it was silly, I go, I don't care. I can do it. When my friends said I couldn't make it through law school and work full time and raise my kids, I just said, well, I'm going to do it. And it never occurred to me that I would fail. And it sounds like you're the same way. It sounds like you're saying, well, okay, they're going to offer me this money, but what if the movie comes out? I want the money. I want the rights to it. I want to have creative control. That's very impressive that you're willing to bet on yourself like that. So now tell me another thing. You also do some work helping others. Some of the things that you talked about doing is coaching. Tell me about your coaching practice.
Depending on what the client wants, whether they want to work through adversity, learn how to be a self-publisher, mentorship, or certain guidance in life. Again, it goes back to what the client wants, how many sessions, they pay the security deposit, and we get straight to work. They fill out a questionnaire form, and I just evaluate everything to figure out where can we go in a direction that makes them a better person when we end this business relationship. That way they'd be more well off. And, it's a situation where, some people got help with more learning how to overcome their adversities with straightforward talk. For example, if someone can relate to me with growing up in a strange relationship with their father, I have to explain to them that there were men who were invested in me. They were my coaches. And, some of the coaches understood my story based on when I got picked up from practice, or based on the paperwork they saw my mom was signing me up or picking me up from practice or the game sometimes. And, those men invested in me in a situation where we understand your adversity, but welcome to the game of life when it comes to playing sports. You have to still do your best, even in the midst of your adversities and hardships and shortcomings.
Yeah. Sports, I got to tell you, sports played a huge role in some of the lessons I learned in life about hard work, teamwork, pushing through adversity. I don't know how many times I rolled an ankle and still had to play. You know what I mean? And I played basketball and I wrestled a little bit here and there, and it's rough. And so your clients, can you give me an idea of what your ideal client is? Like if someone came to Ethan Poetic and said, hey, I need some coaching, who would be your ideal person?
I don't have an ideal person. It's just more, let's just start a conversation and go from there. Because I just can't be like, I'm looking for a certain client. That might discourage somebody from wanting to be a client of mine.
No, that's a good point. So you're willing to talk to anybody?
Not just anybody. It's just a matter of where they are in life, and have to see, are they willing to make an investment? How much time we're going to put into this, and eventually have a cutoff date. Because you got to make sure you have a plan of a start, a middle, and an end. That way, everyone's on the same page. There's no surprises. And then from there, a person's going to end up becoming a better version of themselves. Because I know about mental health problems. I experienced it, but overcame it. For example, when I was in that car accident and recovering for a long period of time, I was on a Christmas list full of medicines. And I'll give you the best example of those medicines. It's let's say, for example, we meet in person at California where you're at. We have lunch. But before we have lunch, we shake hands. When you shake my hand, you feel that skin-to-skin contact in our nerve endings. But if I was to shake your hand with an oven mitt, there's a handshake, but the thing is that oven mitt blocks us from skin-to-skin contact in our nerves. And that oven mitt is like medicine, where it was desensitizing me with all 5 of my body senses. When I was going through that detox, little by little, where the list went from here to lower, eventually I start regaining stuff, but eventually I have to rewire stuff where I got to accept the fact, okay, I wasn't there at someone's funeral. I missed out on paying my respect to somebody. And then one time, it wasn't so sometime later where I get interviewed when I'm finally coming to talk about this stuff. And the article mentioned some of my breakthroughs was overcoming survivor's remorse.
Mm.
And I didn't know I was going through that because every time the anniversary would get closer and closer, I would feel some waves of emotion.
Yeah.
But I realized how it relates to other people is that survivor's remorse can relate to someone who lost a dear friend, a pet, a family member, a parent, or the roles could be reversed where a parent loses their child and have to bury them.
Yeah.
And survivor's remorse could also relate to a woman who went through a miscarriage or lost her child during birth or some complicated reason. And
Yeah.
also people in the military go through survivor's remorse as well when they lose, someone that was in the platoon with them or in the middle of combat.
Yeah.
And,
So appreciate everything you're saying there. Let me shift gears a little bit. What is your bachelor's degree and what was your specialty there?
speech communication, minor broadcasting and media. It's right here. This is
Oh, no.
Millersville University.
Oh, nice.
Here's my degree.
Man, look at that. It's a little
Light
bright. It's a little bright, but that's okay. We can see it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you got a degree in bachelor's degree, and then you received Pennsylvania Commonwealth citations from Senator Scott Martin and House of Representative Mike Sturla. Tell me about that.
What ended up happening was either I reached out to Scott Martin or he reached out to me, and it got a word to me in the mail. Then I went to Michael's and got a frame, made a speech about it, and thanked them very much. Then I realized, okay, since the Republican's going to give me this, why not reach out to Mike Sturla since I already know him? And less than 2 weeks later, he sends me one in the mail. I make another speech about it from the Democrat standpoint, and I emphasize to people, it wasn't a situation where I'm involved with politics.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's more of a situation of people involved with politics recognizing me for my grit, perseverance, in overcoming stuff. Because when I start receiving all these accolades with a proclamation declaration from Lexington City Council and the mayor, Denise Sirachi, it was all initiated by me and Lexington City Council member Janet Diaz. And one day I get an email saying they're ready to have me included in the meeting after they get on their agenda. And when I told them the story, they were just amazed. And I already knew most of the city council members, including the mayor, and they voted unanimously yes, which is yay. Mm-hmm. And once I got that, I took a picture with Janet Diaz and thanked her. And then there's other accolades I ended up getting along the way. Like, for example, I ended up, while I was at Millersville University towards my senior year, they appointed me a mentor named Bob Paul, who's also an alumni of Millersville University. When I told him who I am, and he started researching me about my car accident, I'm like, this is what happened. He said, wait. You went through all this, and you graduated not once, but twice? And you know what he did? He ended up contacting Dr. Teresa Russell-Loretz, head of comm and theater department at Millersville University, told her that I get invited to go in their Zoom meeting. And then next when she talks about me, she's all excited, enthusiastic, and she says, I'm going to have a special award named after you in honor of your adversity, because when I graduated from HAC, one of my first choices to apply to was Millersville University. And the situation was nobody, such as the HR department, the president, none of the professors, the support staff, or janitors knew about my story. Because the only thing I would do mostly in college was, for HAC as well, was simply just go there, do my work. If I got to work on a group project, I'd do that. Meet with the tutors, I'd do that. And then I go to work right after that. And when they realized, wait, you mean to tell me you went through all this and you came here on this campus and you're leaving with a college degree twice? It became a monumental moment where I realized they're not only proud of me, they're willing to support me all the way. For example, Dr. Teresa Russell-Loretz also wrote a foreword for me in my book.
That's awesome.
She's one of 8 of the forewords.
That's awesome. The thing I like about your story, the thing that I think is great, is that you're such a go-getter. And what I mean by that is that I often tell people all the time, um, a closed mouth does not get fed. I remember, I'll tell this story. I ran a wrestling promotion that did charitable events for a long time, and it was a local independent wrestling promotion. And the WWE came to town, and there was a tradition where all the indie promotions in the area would kind of hang out in the parking lot and just kind of secretly hand out flyers. And I walked in, and a security guard came up and said, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that." And so all the other people were like, "Oh, well, we'll just kind of hide over here and hand them out here." And, they were kind of trying to do it in secret. And I just said, "You know what? This is silly. Like, why would we do this in secret?" So I walked up to security and I said, "Hey, listen, who do I talk to about getting approval to pass out flyers here in the parking lot? Because we run charitable events and do all these things." And the other people who were there was a group there that was kind of running for another promotion, and they were like all mad at me. And they were like, "Why are you doing this? You're going to ruin it for all of us. They're going to kick us all out of here." And I was like, let me ask them. And say that they said, "Well, we can't really do it tonight. We don't have approval, but here's a phone number." And it was a phone number to someone within the WWE. And I called them and I said, "Hey, listen, I run a charitable promotion here in Sacramento, and I would really love to be able to pass out flyers at your next show." And they were like, "Oh yeah, tell you what, next time you come by, we'll set you up, we'll set you up with a booth." And I go, "Oh, cool, like outside?" He goes, "No, inside. We'll set you up a booth inside, and we'll give you some, we'll give you some merch that you can kind of hand out and stuff like that." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And so from there, I struck up a relationship where every time they came by, they would call us. They would actually call me, and they would say, "Hey, by the way, not only that, but do you have extras that we could use for WWE Raw? Like, do you have names of people that we could use?" And they would always call me last minute, and so I only went there one time, and they called me 3 or 4. But the point is that all of those people who were running around the parking lot were mad at me for going and opening my mouth. But opening my mouth means I'm not in the parking lot. I'm on a booth inside, right? And that's what I think is so interesting for you, Ethan, is that you could have easily just been cool with Scott Martin giving you that thing. And you said, "Hey, I got this from Scott. Why don't I call Mike Sterla too?" And boom, now you got 2. And the next thing you know, Deneen Sirachi's calling you. And all of these things cascade because you're not afraid to open your mouth. And I think a lot of people can learn from that. Because a lot of these things, there are so many people in your life. This is me kind of getting up on a soapbox, so I apologize for this. But there's so many people in people's lives who are so willing to tell you they can't do it. But you know what? There's never been a person who's been successful that I'm aware of that told anybody they couldn't do anything. So just remember that if someone out there is telling you that you can't do it, that is not a reflection of you. That is a reflection of them. Because they can't do it. You can do it. You can do anything you want to. And Ethan, you're a perfect example of that. You had it harder than I did. I mean, I had, I make it sound like I had this terrible life. I really didn't. I mean, yeah, my dad was a drug addict, but my parents loved me, and they still love me, and they're very supportive. You had a rough go, and you still made it, and you're still making it, and you're still pushing. I can't wait, Ethan, to see the movie that you independently produce of your story. That's going to be awesome. Let me ask you a couple of questions I ask everybody. We've talked a lot about your successes. What would you say is your biggest failure in life, and what did you learn from it?
My biggest failure. There's quite a few. Like one, for example.
Yeah, give me one. What's the biggest one?
Can I give 2?
Okay, yeah, give me 2.
Well, in college, I struggled with math. I had already failed it twice. It was just pre-algebra. And, it's just a situation. The first time I took it, I tried to do it during summertime, but the professor suggested I withdraw because I'm on the boundary line of not passing. If you don't have a certain GPA, I could be on academic probation.
Right.
The second time I did the math class, I was on the edge, and it was during COVID. And I'm like, this is now or never. And, you know, I'm talking to the professor, talking things over with my tutor, my academic advisor. And I said, you know, it's time to roll the dice. Let's go all in. And when I took the final exam, I passed it. And what helped in that failure was learning from why I failed the first time and looking at all the problems and looking at, hey, maybe I didn't put enough time with the tutors. Maybe I didn't ask the right questions. Maybe I didn't practice enough. Another failure would have been, let's see, me taking 3 times to pass my driving test because I got my permit. I was so happy for that. When I was practicing with different cars was because everyone's schedule was different during the daytime for me to practice. So the first time I went with somebody's car, I missed the curve, missed getting into the what's that thing? Parallel parking just by an inch.
Hate that.
And the second time,
I still suck at that.
the second time I missed it by half an inch. And then finally the third time was a charm. And after that, the guy told me, drive around, make sure you stop at the stop signs, look both ways, do your turn signals. After that, he told me part where the X is. He tells me I pass. I get the paperwork. I go back inside, get my picture taken. And the guy who helped me get, actually the married couple that helped me get my driver's license for with this third car that was much different. And after that, it was just a happy day to not allow failure to define me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Now, one last question. Everyone eventually passes away. Nobody gets through this life without it. And so we hope sometime in the future, 40, 50 years from now, Ethan A. Poetic passes away. And there's going to be a funeral and there'd be a eulogy. What is the one thing that you hope someone says about you in their eulogy?
It's going to be several things. Well, it's a situation where, you know, Father Time does catch up to us. Mother Time does catch up to us. All I can say is just, hey, I know in between my dash, I did a lot. I went from a single-parent household to a business owner to a college graduate. What I want people to remember is that I didn't give up, even when certain people weren't there to help me. I, persevered. I want you to persevere in your life and continue to grow. Maybe even do better than me. Maybe graduate college at a much earlier age. And then, it's hard to say because I realize a future death is not only about me, it's also about having a significant other, children, and, I know in the obituary or wherever it's called, there's going to be a listing of the education, my achievements, my legacy, and what I left behind, because I can't take all this stuff with me. And that's just something to believe because, we can look at the person who has the most wealth. You can look at Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. They give away close to 98% of their wealth to nonprofits as philanthropists, and it helped making the world become better.
Yeah.
And then you also look at, people who have much less that are still making an impact. But ultimately, I just want people to understand that, hey, you can look at my YouTube videos of all my accomplishments. I didn't do it for the likes. I only did it because it's a work in progress where I overcame. Because before, when I overcame a lot of stuff and got back to society, I thought originally, hey, I could just go back in the sunset. Let's get this college degree at Hack and then transfer to a university, get my driver's license. I could just go in the sunset. But the problem was I got, not that it was intentional, I can say I got pushed outside my comfort zone to become this successful. Because I was working with kids, with student athletes, sometimes working in school buildings, and, parents who got access to technology, they would research my name, and at the job they bring up the car accident. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this. I want to come here and work. This is my sanctuary. And one day my boss tells me I got to get used to being inspiration. And that's when I start realize I have to direct this attention to more showing more of a progressive life beyond the car accident that people may look up. And eventually what happened was when I did get my proclamation declaration, and like city council member and Denise Sarachi all said yes. While that was going down, there was this writer named John Walk who heard my story and reached out to me and wanted to write an inspirational story about me. And I ended up making the front page of the newspaper, April 1st, 2021. And a month later, I got featured on WJL by Barbara Barb. And I say all that to say, you never know who's watching. Sometimes you have to step outside your comfort zone and do something different to become successful, whether it's your marriage, your sobriety, your mental health, living in a different environment. Just don't limit yourself, because I never limited myself.
No, that's true, and that's awesome. You know, there's so much there that you said that really hits home. And you know, one of the things I would push back on you a little bit. You know, it sounded like, and I don't think you meant to do this, but you brought, well, maybe somebody, you know, will get a degree faster than I did. I was 31 years old when I got my law degree. You know, the people I was graduating with were 24, 25. And so, but the thing is that I am still just as, if not more successful than any of them. And, you know, there are so many kids out there. I tell this to my son. I was having this conversation not too long ago because he's going into a senior year of high school. And I told him, I go, listen, like you don't have to have your whole life figured out by 18 or 21 or 25 or even 30 or 40. You don't have to have that figured out. You look at some of these people, you know, Michael Jordan was cut from his JV basketball team. Oprah Winfrey at 23 was fired from a media job. Oprah Winfrey, right? But that's okay because they weren't Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey yet. They had to get cut and fired to become Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey. So if you don't have anything figured, you don't have yourself figured out, that's okay. Life is long. You haven't peaked yet. And Ethan, you haven't peaked yet either. I'm looking forward to hearing more about where you go from here. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad to meet you. Where can people find you?
Let's see. I'm on social media. Let's see for Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. My username is Ethan Poetic 23. ETHAN POETIC 23. Twitter is Ethan V23. My LinkedIn is Ethan Poetic. My YouTube is Ethan Poetic. Then on my Facebook, I got 2 different profiles. There's Ethan Poetic, the poetry page, where I have close to 3,000 likes for like viewers that follow me on there. Then I still have my regular, profile is Ethan Poetic, even though I gave Facebook the legal documents that shows that I did legally change my last name to Poetic in the summer of 2021, but for some reason they don't want to change it. So it's Ethan Vaughn. The last name is spelled VAUGHN. Location, Lancaster, PA. Part of the reason why I changed my last name is because Vaughn does not belong to me, because it belongs to the German slave masters who bought my African ancestors from the Cambridge Bay of Maryland. And last but not least, to purchase my book and support me, is my book is called The Inspirational Story of Ethan A. Poetic, Chronicles of Adversity, Education, Sports, Resiliency. It's print on demand on Amazon, Target, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and any other place you find online. And if you need me for keynote speaking at your college, universities, private schools, charter schools, public schools, and events, you may contact me at ethanspeaks.com. And in my constellation page, you can fill out the form or email me directly, and we can work out an arrangement. Or if you want to buy a book off of me directly, where I mail it to you and just charge you for the book and the shipping and handling, I'll sign it, autograph it, and I'll make sure to screenshot the tracking number, send it to you. That way we're both know where everything's going.
Awesome. Lots of places. So I really appreciate that. Everybody follow Ethan. Let's watch his journey. I'm really excited to see where you go. Like I said, you are a go-getter, and I have no doubt that you're going to be successful in whatever you do. For everybody who's listening, I appreciate you following through the last hour and 15 minutes we've been on. I know I talk a lot, and these are long form, but I appreciate it. I love meeting new people. That's why I love a podcast. I love having it because there's no other way where I would have really met or had an opportunity to have an hour-long conversation with a guy like Ethan Poetic. We got a lot more exciting stuff coming up, so go ahead and subscribe, follow. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on, I don't know, Google, whatever, and anywhere you can find a podcast. So really appreciate it. Thanks, Ethan, for coming on, and we will talk to you guys later.